hidden link between childhood neglect and addiction isn't just a medical theory. It's a profound truth that shapes millions of lives every single day. When we look at addiction through the lens of childhood experiences, we begin to understand that what we often label as weakness or moral failing is actually the human psyche's attempt to cope with unresolved pain. Gabor Maté's groundbreaking work has illuminated this connection in ways that transform how we view both addiction and recovery, showing us that beneath every addiction lies a story of disconnection, trauma, and the desperate search for relief from emotional wounds that were never properly addressed. Childhood neglect doesn't always look like what we might imagine from movies or dramatic stories. It's not always about physical abandonment or obvious abuse. Often, it's the subtle absence of emotional attunement, the moments when a child's needs for connection, validation, and safety went unmet. It's the parent who was physically present but emotionally unavailable, perhaps struggling with their own unhealed trauma. It's the household where survival took precedence over nurturing, where a child learned early that their emotional world didn't matter or wasn't safe to express. These experiences create what Maté describes as a fundamental disconnection from the self, a severing of the natural bond between our authentic feelings and our sense of worth. The developing brain of a child is incredibly vulnerable to these early relational experiences. When a child doesn't receive consistent emotional mirroring, when their needs are dismissed or ignored, when they're made to feel that their very existence is burdensome, something profound happens in their neurological development. The stress response systems become hyperactive, always scanning for danger, while the areas of the brain responsible for self-regulation and emotional processing remain underdeveloped. This isn't the child's fault, nor is it necessarily the parent's conscious choice. It's often the continuation of generational patterns of trauma that have never been addressed. What emerges from this early neglect is a deep sense of shame and inadequacy that becomes the lens through which the child, and later the adult, views themselves and the world. This shame isn't about specific actions or behaviors. It's an existential shame about one's very being. It whispers messages like, "I'm not enough. I don't deserve love. Something is fundamentally wrong with me." These aren't conscious thoughts that can be easily reasoned away. They're deeply embedded beliefs that shape every interaction, every decision, every moment of self-reflection. This is where the seeds of addiction are planted. When someone carries this level of internal pain, when their nervous system is constantly activated by unresolved trauma, when they feel fundamentally disconnected from themselves and others, they naturally seek relief. Addiction isn't primarily about the substance or behavior itself. It's about the temporary escape it provides from unbearable internal states. It's the nervous system's attempt to find regulation, to quiet the storm of anxiety, depression, rage, or emptiness that has become the person's constant companion. The substances or behaviors that become addictive serve a function that's both logical and necessary from the perspective of survival. They provide what the person never received in childhood: a sense of peace, connection, or control. Alcohol might quiet the anxious mind. Drugs might fill the emptiness. Gambling might provide the excitement that makes someone feel alive. Shopping might offer the temporary illusion of worth and control. These aren't character flaws. They're adaptive responses to impossible circumstances. Understanding this connection helps us see why traditional approaches to addiction that focus solely on stopping the behavior often fail. You can't simply remove someone's primary coping mechanism without addressing the underlying wounds that made that coping mechanism necessary in the first place. It's like trying to heal a broken bone by just removing the cast. Without proper treatment of the injury itself, the pain and dysfunction will continue, and the person will likely seek other ways to find relief. The tragedy is that addiction, while providing temporary relief, ultimately recreates the very dynamics of neglect and abandonment that created the original wound. The shame deepens, relationships become more strained, self-trust erodes further, and the person becomes even more disconnected from their authentic self. It's a cruel cycle where the medicine becomes the poison, where the solution becomes part of the problem. But here's where Maté's work offers profound hope. When we understand addiction as a response to trauma rather than a moral failing, When we see the person behind the behavior as someone who was once a wounded child trying to survive, everything changes. The path to healing doesn't begin with judgment or punishment. It begins with compassion, understanding, and the creation of safe spaces where that wounded inner child can finally be seen, heard, and held. The healing journey requires what was missing in childhood: authentic connection, emotional attunement, and the experience of being unconditionally accepted. This doesn't mean enabling destructive behaviors, but rather seeing past those behaviors to the human being who is suffering and responding with the kind of love and understanding that can begin to repair decades of disconnection and shame. Recovery becomes not just about stopping a behavior, but about reclaiming one's authentic self, learning to feel feelings without being overwhelmed by them, and developing healthy ways to meet the needs that addiction was attempting to meet. It's about creating new neural pathways of safety and connection, healing the nervous system, and learning to be present with oneself without the need for escape. Think about this for a moment. Have you ever noticed patterns in your own life where you seek comfort or escape when you're feeling overwhelmed, disconnected, or not good enough? Maybe it's not substances, but perhaps it's work, relationships, social media, or any number of behaviors that help you avoid difficult feelings. Have you ever wondered where those patterns came from, what they might be trying to tell you about unmet needs from your past? I want to take a moment here to thank everyone who clicked on this video and is taking the time to really think about these important questions. Your willingness to explore these topics takes courage, and I'm grateful you're here on this journey of understanding with me. The beautiful truth that emerges from this understanding is that healing is possible at any stage of life. The human brain maintains its capacity for change and growth throughout our entire lifespan. The neural pathways that were formed in childhood in response to neglect and trauma can be rewired through new experiences of safety, connection, and self-compassion. This doesn't happen overnight, and it's not always a linear process, but it is absolutely possible. The process of healing often begins with simply acknowledging the connection between past experiences and present struggles. This isn't about blaming parents or dwelling in victimhood. It's about understanding the logical progression from childhood wounds to adult coping mechanisms. Most parents did the best they could with the resources and awareness they had, often while dealing with their own unhealed trauma. Understanding this can actually be a pathway to compassion for everyone involved. What's particularly powerful about Mate's approach is how it emphasizes that we don't have to remain prisoners of our past. While we can't change what happened to us, we can change our relationship to those experiences. We can learn to see our younger selves with compassion rather than judgment, to understand our coping mechanisms as intelligent responses to difficult circumstances rather than evidence of our inadequacy. The healing process involves learning to repair in ourselves, to give ourselves the emotional attunement, validation, and unconditional love that we needed as children. This isn't about indulgence or avoiding responsibility. It's about creating the internal safety and stability that allows us to show up fully in our lives without the need for escape or numbing. One of the most profound aspects of this work is how it transforms our relationship with difficult emotions. Instead of seeing feelings like sadness, anger, or fear as problems to be solved or avoided, we can learn to see them as messengers carrying important information about our needs and experiences. When we can be present with our emotions without being overwhelmed by them, we no longer need substances or behaviors to help us cope. This transformation often involves learning to set healthy boundaries, to say no when we need to prioritize our well-being without guilt, and to seek out relationships and environments that support our healing rather than perpetuate old patterns of harm. It's about learning that we are worthy of love and care, not because of what we do or achieve, but simply because we exist. The journey also involves developing what psychologists call emotional regulation skills, the ability to notice when we're becoming dysregulated and to have healthy tools for returning to a state of calm and centeredness. This might include breathing techniques, mindfulness practices, physical movement, creative expression, or simply learning to pause and check in with ourselves before reacting to stressful situations. Community and connection play crucial roles in this healing process. Humans are inherently social beings, and much of our healing happens in relationship with others. This might involve therapy, support groups, spiritual communities, or simply friendships where we can be authentic and vulnerable. The key is finding spaces where we can practice being seen and accepted for who we really are, not just the persona we've created to survive. And here's something I find particularly beautiful about this work. When we heal our own relationship with ourselves, we naturally become more compassionate and understanding toward others. We begin to see past people's behaviors to the wounds they might be carrying, and we become less likely to perpetuate cycles of judgment and shame. This creates a ripple effect that can literally change families and communities for generations to come. The process isn't always comfortable, and there are no quick fixes or magic solutions. Healing trauma and changing deeply ingrained patterns takes time, patience, and often professional support. But every small step toward self-understanding and self-compassion is significant. Every moment of choosing presence over avoidance, connection over isolation, compassion over self-criticism is a victory worth celebrating. Now, I know this might sound a bit unconventional, but if you've made it this far in the video and you're finding value in these insights about childhood neglect and addiction, I'd love it if you could hit the like button. Think of it as giving a virtual hug to that wounded inner child we've been talking about, both yours and mine. It really helps more people discover these important conversations about healing and understanding. What I find most hopeful about Maté's work is how it reframes our entire understanding of human behavior and suffering. Instead of asking, "What's wrong with this person?" we learn to ask, "What happened to this person?" Instead of seeing addiction as a moral failing, we see it as an understandable response to pain. Instead of focusing solely on stopping destructive behaviors, we focus on healing the wounds that made those behaviors necessary. This shift in perspective has profound implications not just for how we treat addiction, but for how we approach mental health, parenting, education, and social policy. When we understand that many of our social problems have roots in childhood trauma and neglect, we can begin to address these issues at their source rather than just managing their symptoms. For those who recognize themselves in this description, who see the connection between their own childhood experiences and current struggles, please know that acknowledging this connection is not a sign of weakness. It's a sign of incredible strength and wisdom. It takes courage to look honestly at our past and its impact on our present. And that courage is the first step toward genuine healing and transformation. The path forward involves treating ourselves with the same compassion we would offer a beloved friend or family member who was struggling. It means being patient with the healing process, celebrating small victories, and being gentle with ourselves when we have setbacks. It means surrounding ourselves with people who support our growth and distancing ourselves from those who perpetuate old patterns of harm. Remember that healing doesn't mean becoming perfect or never struggling again. It means developing a different relationship with our struggles, seeing them as opportunities for growth rather than evidence of our inadequacy. It means learning to be present with life's inevitable challenges without losing ourselves in the process. As we wrap up this exploration of the hidden link between childhood neglect and addiction, I want to leave you with this thought. Every person you encounter is carrying some form of invisible wound, some story of childhood pain that shaped who they became. When we can hold this awareness with compassion rather than judgment, when we can see past behaviors to the human being underneath, we create the kind of world where healing becomes possible for everyone. Thank you so much for joining me on this journey of understanding today. If this resonated with you, I'd be grateful if you'd give this video a like to help others discover these important insights. And if you feel moved to share your own thoughts or experiences related to this topic, please don't hesitate to leave a comment below. Your story might be exactly what someone else needs to hear. If you're ready to continue exploring these themes of healing and human understanding, there's another video appearing on your screen right now that dives even deeper into these concepts. And if these conversations are speaking to your soul and you want to be part of a community committed to understanding the deeper truths about human behavior and healing, consider subscribing to Not What It Seems. Until next time, be gentle with yourself and remember that your story of healing matters.